The sky had never looked like this before. The clouds above the ancient settlement near what would one day be called Mesopotamia began to glow with a strange golden light. The morning air grew hot and thick. People pointed upward, their voices rising in both fear and wonder as the sun seemed to come down from the heavens. Children held on to their mothers while men gripped their spears, unsure whether to prepare for battle or run for shelter. Then it appeared. A massive object descended through the clouds, moving with impossible smoothness. It was not stone or wood or anything the people had ever seen before. The ship was made of a material that shimmered like water, but felt hard as rock when the brave souls dared to touch it later. It landed on the open ground near the village with barely a sound, creating a gentle gust of wind that knocked down grass and dried plants, but did nothing else violent or dangerous. For what felt like forever, nothing happened. The settlement held its breath. Mothers whispered prayers to gods they could not name. The tribal leaders, stern-faced men named David, Marcus, and others whose names would be lost to time, gathered together to decide what to do. David was the youngest and boldest among them. He had always been different from the other hunters. His mind worked in strange ways, solving problems others could not see. He felt no fear when others felt terror. Instead, he felt curiosity. Then a door opened in the side of the great metal vessel. A ramp descended slowly, making soft mechanical sounds that no human had ever heard. From inside the ship came a figure that made everyone step back at once. She was tall and thin in a way that seemed wrong somehow, like she did not belong to Earth. Her skin had a faint blue shimmer to it, and her eyes were too large and too bright. Behind her came other similar figures, all dressed in clothing that seemed to move and shift with its own life. One of them held a strange device that gave off a soft humming sound. The tall figure stepped forward slowly and deliberately. Her name was Lauren Hayes, and she was an ambassador from the Valorian Federation, a civilization that had traveled across the stars for thousands of years. She had seen many first contact moments in her life, but this one felt different. She could feel the tension and fear radiating from the humans below. She understood that this moment would change everything for them forever. Lauren held out her hands empty and open, a universal gesture of peace. She smiled, though her smile was strange to human eyes showing too many teeth. The humans did not relax. David, however, did something brave. He stepped forward from the group, moving away from the others. His father grabbed his arm and tried to pull him back, but David broke free. He walked toward Lauren with measured steps, his young face set with determination. Lauren watched this young human approach with great interest. She signaled her team to stay back. This young one was different from the others. Something in his bearing, in the way he moved and held himself, showed intelligence and courage beyond what she had expected from humans at this technological level. When David was close enough to speak, though he could not understand her words, she began to make gentle sounds and use hand signals to communicate. She pointed to herself and said her name slowly. She pointed to David and waited, listening to him say his name in return. Dr. Marcus Webb, the scientific advisor of the Valorian team, watched this exchange with his large eyes growing even larger. He held his scanning device closer to David, taking readings. The data that came back shocked him. This human's genetic structure showed markers of something unusual, something that should not exist in a species at this stage of development. He turned to Lauren with a confused expression and handed her the data pad. She looked at the results and her expression changed. She had expected to find primitive humans with no connection to anything beyond Earth. Instead, she was finding evidence of ancient genetic engineering, modifications that went back further than anyone had anticipated. The implications were staggering. If humans had been genetically modified by another civilization, then this world had been visited before. But that should have been impossible. The Valorian Federation had kept careful records of all first contact moments for over 10,000 years. Their databases would have shown if anyone else had visited this world, unless something had happened much longer ago, something that predated even their records. Unless there had been an ancient race, one lost to history that had come here long before anyone else. Back at the ship, the other members of the Valorian delegation watched this meeting with intense interest. Some of them felt excited about what they might discover. Others felt worried about the rules they were about to break. They all knew that there were strict laws about contacting primitive civilizations. They all knew that Prime Directive stated they should only observe and gather information, never making direct contact or sharing technology. But their ambassador had already broken protocol by coming down and talking directly to this human. Lauren made a decision in that moment. She would continue with this contact, consequences be damned. She could see in David's eyes a spark of something extraordinary. She could see intelligence, curiosity, and potential. She could see the future. This young man would either become a legend or be forgotten by history. In that moment, standing on ancient Earth with a being from the stars, David felt destiny settling onto his shoulders like a weight and a blessing all at once. The sun was beginning to set when Lauren finally returned to the ship with her team. David watched them go, his mind filled with images and ideas that his people had no words for. He had seen wonders. He had touched metal that came from the stars. He had looked into the eyes of something that was not human and felt a connection of understanding. That night he would tell the story to his tribe, and they would think him mad or blessed. Neither would be fully wrong. The next morning Lauren would return, and the real work of changing human destiny would begin. The morning sun painted the sky in shades of orange and red as David walked toward the landing site. He had not slept. All night he had lain awake, thinking about the visitors from the stars. His father had warned him not to go back. The tribal elders had called him foolish and stubborn. But David knew in his heart that this was important. This was bigger than anything their people had ever experienced. He could feel it in his bones, a pull toward destiny that he could not resist or explain. Lauren was waiting for him when he arrived. She stood outside the ship with Dr. Marcus Webb and 2 other members of her team. She smiled when she saw David approaching alone. She appreciated his bravery and his individuality. In her thousands of years of life, she had learned that young beings with courage and vision were the ones who truly changed their worlds. This time, Lauren had brought tools to help with communication. She had a device that could translate basic sounds and create visual representations of meaning. She pointed to herself and said her name slowly. Then she pointed to David. He understood and repeated his name. She nodded with approval. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled up her sleeve to show her skin, which had that strange blue shimmer. She pointed to David and then made a gesture to show he was different from her. David watched this carefully. Lauren knew she had to be patient. These humans had no frame of reference for anything she was about to show them. She decided to start with simple things. She pointed to the sky and spoke the word for stars in a way that her translation device could convert into sounds David might understand. Then she pointed to her ship and made a gesture to show that the ship had traveled from far away. She drew a simple picture in the dirt with a stick, showing the sun and then other dots around it, trying to represent planets. David stared at the picture for a long time. Then something amazing happened. David bent down and added to the picture. He drew lines connecting the dots and then made a gesture with his hands to show movement and travel. He looked at Lauren with bright eyes. He was trying to tell her that he understood. He was showing her that his mind could grasp the concept she was trying to communicate. Lauren felt a surge of hope. This human was not just intelligent. He was capable of abstract thinking. He could imagine things he had never seen. Dr. Marcus Webb took readings as David and Lauren continued their strange conversation. The data he was collecting was fascinating and troubling at the same time. David's brain patterns were showing activity in areas that should not be so developed in a human. At this stage of civilization, his genetic markers kept showing those same unusual patterns. Something in David's ancestry had been changed. Something in his blood carried the echo of engineering from an ancient time. Over the next hours, Lauren attempted to teach David basic concepts about the solar system. She used visual demonstrations and hand signals. She showed him how gravity worked by dropping different objects and explaining through gesture and tone of voice. She showed him how planets orbited the sun by having David walk in circles around her while she stood still. David understood more than she expected. He began to anticipate what she was trying to teach him. He asked questions through pointing and expression. Then Lauren decided to show David something that would change his entire worldview. She brought him inside the ship. David's people were watching from a distance, terrified and amazed. They thought they might never see him again. But David was not afraid. The interior of the ship was unlike anything he could have imagined. The walls glowed with soft light. Strange devices hummed with unknown purposes. Large windows showed the earth below and the sky above in ways that should not have been possible. David felt dizzy looking at it all. He had to sit down on a smooth bench made of materials he could not identify. Lauren showed him images on a screen. She showed him pictures of other worlds, other stars, other civilizations. She showed him cities that rose into the sky like mountains made by humans or beings like the Valorians. She showed him technology and art and wonders that made David's eyes grow wide with tears. He was seeing proof that his world was small. He was seeing proof that there were other intelligent beings out there. He was seeing the future, though he did not know it yet. Dr. Marcus Webb was running more advanced scans on David, trying to understand the mystery of his genetic structure. He brought his findings to Lauren in a private section of the ship. The data was clear but almost unbelievable. David's DNA showed signs of deliberate modification going back at least 100,000 years. Someone or something had come to this world in the distant past and changed human genetics. The modifications were subtle but strategic. They had enhanced cognitive abilities. They had increased life expectancy slightly. They had created a species with greater potential than would have evolved naturally. Lauren listened to Dr. Webb's report with growing concern. This changed everything about their mission. This was not a simple first contact with a primitive species. This was a reunion with descendants of an ancient genetic experiment. Someone had started humanity down this path. Someone had given humans the potential to become something great, and now she, Lauren, was part of the next chapter of that story. When David emerged from the ship after hours of seeing wonders and learning impossible things, his tribe approached him slowly. They could see that something had changed in him. His eyes held a different light. His bearing was different. The young man who had entered the ship now carried himself like someone who had seen beyond the veil of their world. He began to speak to them about what he had learned. He used words and gestures and excitement that was almost overwhelming. He told them about worlds in the sky. He told them about other beings who had traveled between the stars. He told them about the infinite expanse of space and the countless possibilities that existed beyond their settlement. The elders listened with skepticism and wonder mixed together. Some thought he was mad. Others sensed that something fundamental had shifted. The world they had known their entire lives suddenly seemed very small and limited. As the sun set that evening, David stood outside his dwelling and looked up at the stars. He could see them now with new eyes. He understood that somewhere out there among those points of light there were others. There were civilizations and worlds and possibilities, and his world had been chosen by one of them for a reason. The visitors from the stars had chosen him, specifically him, to learn and to understand. He did not know why yet, but he was certain that this was only the beginning of something vast and important that would echo through generations to come. 3 days had passed since David first entered the alien ship. 3 days of learning and teaching and discovering secrets that the universe had kept hidden from his people. Each day, David would meet with Lauren and her team. Each day, his understanding of the world grew larger and more complex. He was learning faster than anyone on the Valorian team had anticipated. His mind absorbed information like Earth absorbs water after rain. The translation device had improved its ability to work with his language. Simple conversations had become more detailed and meaningful. On the morning of the 4th day, something changed. Dr. Marcus Webb had been analyzing the data from David's genetic samples. He had been working late into the night, staring at his screens and looking through ancient records in the Valorian database. When he finally looked up from his work, his face was pale and his eyes held a mixture of confusion and fear. He immediately requested a private meeting with Lauren. They spoke in the secure chamber of the ship, away from the other team members and far from where David waited outside. Dr. Webb showed Lauren the results of his investigation. The genetic modifications in David's DNA did not match anything in their current database. They did not match any known Valorian genetic engineering. They did not match the work of any civilization that had contacted the Valorian Federation in recorded history. But there were records, old records, ancient records that predated even the founding of the Valorian Federation. Records of a race called the Architects. The Architects had been an advanced civilization that existed hundreds of thousands of years ago. They had traveled the galaxy seeding life on various planets, creating new species through careful genetic modification. They had created a template for intelligent life, and then allowed it to develop naturally on each world. They believed that species should grow and develop at their own pace, guided by the potential built into their very genes. The Architects had disappeared mysteriously over 100,000 years ago. No one knew what had happened to them. Some believed they had transcended physical form. Others believed they had simply moved beyond the reach of known space. Earth had been one of their laboratory worlds. Humanity had been one of their experiments. The early human ancestors had been modified to have greater capacity for learning, greater capacity for cooperation, and greater capacity for abstract thought than they would have developed naturally. The architects had then withdrawn and watched as humanity slowly grew and developed over tens of thousands of years. Humans had no knowledge of this. They had no memory of how they came to be. They had only their myths and their legends and their half-remembered dreams of the sky people who had come before time itself. Lauren sat in silence for a long time after hearing this information. The implications were enormous. Humanity was not a naturally evolved species. Humanity was created. Humanity was designed. Humanity was the work of an ancient race that had disappeared into mystery. And she, Ambassador Lauren Hayes, had just made contact with the descendants of that ancient experiment. But there was more. Dr. Webb showed her the second part of his discovery. The Valorian Federation had strict laws about non-interference with developing civilizations. The Prime Directive stated that younger species must be allowed to grow at their own pace without outside help or guidance. But there had been exceptions to this rule. There had been ancient exceptions that dated back to the time before the Federation existed. There had been civilizations that chose to take responsibility for the species they had created. The Valorians had inherited this responsibility from the architects, though they had chosen to enforce it through the principle of non-interference rather than active guidance. For thousands of years, the Valorians had observed humanity from a distance. They had watched as humans made fire. They had watched as humans created art and music and stories. They had watched as humans learned to farm and build cities. They had watched as humans fought wars and created peace. They had watched as humans suffered and loved and dreamed, and throughout all of this they had done nothing. They had followed the law. They had not interfered. They had allowed humanity to develop according to its own nature and its own choices. Lauren felt the weight of this responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was the ambassador chosen to make contact during this particular cycle of observation. It was her job to assess humanity's progress, to gather data, and to report back to the Federation. It was her job to determine if humanity was ready to join the galactic community or if they needed more time. She had been trained for this role for her entire adult life. She had made first contact with dozens of species before, but this felt different. This felt personal somehow. Then Lauren made a decision that would trouble her for the rest of her life. She decided to tell David the truth. Not all of it, not yet, but enough of it for him to begin to understand. She decided to break the Prime Directive. She decided to act against the laws of the Valorian Federation. When David arrived at the ship that morning, Lauren brought him to a private room. She showed him records from the Valorian database. She showed him historical data about the architects. She showed him genetic records that matched his own DNA structure. She tried to explain through careful translation and visual aids what it meant. She tried to help him understand that his people had not developed naturally. They had been given gifts by an ancient race. They had been given potential and intelligence and the capacity to achieve great things. David listened to everything. His young face grew serious as he tried to comprehend this information. He asked questions in his simple language, and Lauren tried to answer them. Where were these architects now? Why had they left? Why had they created humanity? Why was this information hidden from his people? Why was Lauren telling him this now? Lauren struggled with how to answer these questions. She realized that she had made an impulsive decision, possibly a mistake. She had revealed information that could change David's entire understanding of his place in the universe. She had given him knowledge that he was not supposed to have according to Valorian law, but looking at his eyes, seeing his need to understand and his capacity to accept truth, she knew that she could not go back. She could only go forward. That night, Lauren sent a private message to the Valorian Federation Command, recording her actions and taking full responsibility for the violation of the Prime Directive. She knew there would be consequences. She knew she might lose her position as ambassador. She knew she might face trials and punishment, but she also knew that David deserved to know the truth about his people. He deserved to understand that humanity was not accident or coincidence. Humanity was purpose, and now that purpose was beginning to awaken. Lauren stood at the observation window of the Valorian ship, looking down at the human settlement below. Fires burned in the distance as night fell on ancient Earth. She thought about the choice she had made. She thought about telling David the truth about his people's origins. She thought about the message she had sent to Federation Command, admitting her violation of the Prime Directive. There was no going back now. What she did in the next few days would define not just her own future, but the future of an entire species. Dr. Marcus Webb found her standing there, lost in thought. He approached slowly, carefully, knowing that his ambassador was carrying a heavy burden. Webb had been with Lauren for many years. He understood her values and her principles. He also understood the conflict she felt between following the rules of the Federation and doing what she believed was right. Webb spoke first, his voice quiet but firm. He told Lauren that he had reviewed all the data again. He had examined human potential and human capacity. He had considered what humanity could become if given the right guidance at this critical point in their development. He had thought carefully about the ethics of non-interference versus the ethics of helping a species reach its true potential, and he had come to a conclusion. He believed that Lauren was right to tell David the truth. He believed that humanity deserved to know who they were and where they came from. Lauren turned to face Webb with relief and gratitude. She had been afraid that her decision would be seen as foolish or reckless. She had worried that her scientific advisor would think she had let emotion cloud her judgment. But Webb understood. He saw what Lauren saw in David and in the potential of humanity. He was willing to stand with her, even if it meant facing consequences from the Federation. Together, they made another decision. They decided to do more than simply tell David the truth. They decided to help humanity accelerate its development. They would teach David and his people knowledge that would take them thousands of years to discover on their own. They would share agricultural techniques that would allow humans to grow more food and support larger populations. They would teach them basic metallurgy so they could work with metal and create stronger tools. They would show them principles of written language and mathematics. They would give humanity a foundation to build upon. This was an enormous violation of the Prime Directive. This was taking non-interference and turning it completely upside down. This was active intervention in the development of a younger species. If the Federation found out, Lauren would face serious punishment. She might never work as an ambassador again. She might face imprisonment or exile. But looking at David's face when he learned about his people's true origins, looking at the hunger for knowledge in his eyes, Lauren knew she had to do this. The next morning, Lauren called David to the ship. She brought with her visual materials and teaching devices. She had Webb help her prepare information about agriculture. She showed David how humans could domesticate animals. She explained which plants could be grown in organized fields. She taught him about crop rotation, about understanding seasons, about predicting weather patterns. David absorbed all of this information like a student who had been waiting his entire life for a teacher. But Lauren did not stop there. She taught David about smelting. She showed him how to extract metal from stone. She demonstrated the properties of different metals and how they could be shaped and used. She explained the difference between copper and tin and how mixing them created bronze, a stronger material. She taught him that these skills would allow his people to build tools and weapons and structures that would change their way of life forever. Then came the most important teaching. Lauren brought out writing materials. She taught David a simplified version of the Valorian alphabet. She showed him that sounds could be represented by symbols. She showed him that ideas could be recorded and preserved. She taught him numbers and basic mathematical concepts. She showed him that 2 + 2 always equaled 4. And this principle worked the same way across the entire universe. David realized that he was learning the language of logic itself. As the days went on, Lauren and Webb taught David many things. They showed him star charts marking the position of Earth in the galaxy. They explained that other civilizations existed on other worlds. They warned him that eventually other species would discover Earth. They told him that humanity needed to prepare for that day. They needed to grow strong and intelligent and organized. They needed to be ready to take their place among the stars as equals, not as a primitive species that could be conquered or enslaved. David asked Lauren a question that made her pause. He asked why she was doing this. Why was she breaking the rules of her own civilization? Why was she risking so much to help his people? Lauren struggled to find words to answer him. She tried to explain something about seeing potential in humanity. She tried to explain something about the importance of kindness and compassion. But the real answer was simpler and deeper than that. Lauren told David that she had chosen to do this because it was right. She had chosen to do this because every species deserved the chance to become what they were meant to be. She had chosen to do this because the alternative, standing by and doing nothing while humanity struggled to discover what they were capable of, felt like betraying the gift that the architects had given to his people so long ago. Dr. Webb had been working on another project in secret. He had taken some of the encrypted data from the Valorian database and had recorded it onto specially designed tablets. These tablets were made to last for thousands of years. They contained mathematical formulas and agricultural knowledge and medical information. They contained star charts and historical records. They contained the story of the architects and the genetic foundation of humanity. Webb disguised these tablets as religious artifacts and monuments, so that humans would preserve them and treat them with respect. He scattered them in places where future human civilizations would eventually discover them. The plan was to leave these tablets behind. Over thousands of years, as humanity developed and grew, they would find these artifacts. They would eventually learn to read them and understand the information contained within. The tablets would guide humanity's development without directly interfering with their choices and their free will. It was a compromise between following the rules and helping humanity reach its potential. On the final night before the Valorian ship was scheduled to depart, David stood alone with Lauren under the stars. He had learned so much in just a few days. His understanding of the universe had expanded beyond measure. He felt different, transformed by knowledge and possibility. He asked Lauren if she would stay. He asked if she would continue to teach his people. He asked if she would help them build the future. Lauren felt tears forming in her eyes, something that rarely happened to Valorians. She wanted to stay. Every part of her wanted to stay and watch humanity grow. But she knew she could not. The Federation would never allow it. She had already violated too many rules. She had to return and face the consequences of her choices. But she promised David that humanity had not been forgotten. She promised that the Federation would watch over humanity from a distance. She promised that one day, when humans had grown strong enough and wise enough, they would join the galactic community as equals, and perhaps, she said, they would meet again in that future time. The sun rose over ancient Mesopotamia as the Valorian ship prepared for departure. Lauren stood on the ramp one last time, looking at the world below. David stood in the distance with his tribe, watching the vessel that had brought the stars down to Earth. They had said their goodbyes the night before, but neither of them wanted to accept that this was truly the end. Lauren had been the first contact between humanity and the galactic community. She had changed everything. Now she had to leave David and his people to carry forward what they had learned. Lauren entered the ship and the ramp sealed behind her. The engines hummed to life with a sound that would echo in human legend for generations to come. The vessel rose slowly into the air, lifting higher and higher until it was nothing but a point of light in the sky. David watched until he could no longer see it. Then he turned to his people and began to speak. He spoke of what he had learned. He spoke of the future that awaited humanity. He spoke of a destiny written in the stars. Back on the ship, Lauren made her final report to the Valorian Federation. She recorded everything. She explained her actions. She described her violations of the Prime Directive. She took full responsibility for teaching David and his people advanced knowledge. She explained her reasoning and her justification. She knew that this report would be reviewed by the Federation Council. She knew that there would be a trial. She knew that punishment awaited her, but she also knew that she had done the right thing. Dr. Webb sat beside her as she recorded her statement. He added his own observations and his own support for what Lauren had done. He presented the scientific data showing humanity's unique genetic potential. He argued that humanity deserved a chance to reach its true capabilities. He stated that the knowledge they had shared with David would only accelerate a development process that would have happened eventually anyway. They had simply compressed thousands of years of discovery into a few weeks of teaching. The journey back to Valorian space took many days. During that time, Lauren and Webb discussed what would happen next. They knew the Federation would likely place them under arrest when they arrived. They knew there would be legal proceedings. They knew their careers as they had known them were probably over. But they also knew something else. They knew that what they had done mattered. They knew that they had changed the course of human history, and they knew that it was worth it. Meanwhile, on Earth, David's life had transformed. He was no longer just a young tribal leader. He had become a teacher, a keeper of knowledge, a bridge between his people and the stars. He began to implement what Lauren had taught him. He worked with others in his tribe to create the first organized farming plots. He showed them how to grow crops in a planned and systematic way. He taught them about seasons and weather, and the patterns of nature that Lauren had explained to him. Within a few months, David's tribe had more food than they had ever had before. They could support more people. They could survive harder times. They could grow as a community. Other tribes heard of these changes and sent representatives to learn. David became known as a great teacher and a man favored by the sky people. Stories began to form around him. Myths began to develop. The truth of what had happened was already being mixed with legend and folklore. David also began teaching people to work with metal. He showed them how to find stones that contained metal. He taught them the process of heating and shaping. He created the first bronze tools that his people had ever seen. These tools were stronger than anything made from stone or bone. They could cut better. They could build better. They could create better. David had given his people a new technology, and that technology would transform their civilization. Most importantly, David had learned to write. He used the symbols that Lauren had taught him to record knowledge. He wrote down farming techniques so they would not be forgotten. He wrote down the stories of the sky people and the visit from the stars. He created a permanent record of what had been learned. He hid some of this knowledge in places where future generations would find it. He made sure that the information would survive and be passed down through time. Thousands of years passed. Human civilization grew and developed. The knowledge that David had preserved was rediscovered by later generations. Each discovery was treated as a breakthrough, a moment of genius and insight. No one remembered that it had originally come from the stars, but the information guided human development in subtle ways. The farming techniques led to larger populations and settled civilizations. The metallurgy led to better tools and weapons and the rise of armies and kingdoms. The writing and mathematics led to recorded history and scientific thinking. Civilizations rose in Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and India. They built cities and temples and monuments. Some of the tablets that Dr. Webb had created were discovered and treated as sacred texts. Some were built into the foundations of temples. Some were lost and rediscovered centuries later. Each time someone found one of these ancient artifacts, it contained information that seemed impossible for ancient people to have known. Scholars debated and theorized about where this knowledge could have come from. Thousands of years after David lived and died, the Valorian Federation sent a new ship to Earth. This ship arrived to find a world transformed. Humanity had progressed from primitive hunter-gatherers to a technological civilization. They had invented writing and mathematics and science. They had built cities and governments and complex societies. They had created art and music and philosophy. They had reached the level of development that would allow them to join the galactic community. A young human diplomat named Marcus, who was descended directly from David's bloodline, met with the new Valorian ambassador. Marcus told the ambassador the story of David and the first contact with the sky people 10,000 years ago. The ambassador listened carefully. She had studied the records of that first contact. She knew about Ambassador Lauren Hayes and her violation of the Prime Directive. She knew about the trial and the conviction and the exile that had followed. But she also knew what Lauren's actions had accomplished. The Federation had been divided about whether Lauren had done the right thing. Some officials believed she was a criminal who had violated sacred laws. Others believed she was a hero who had helped a species reach its potential. Over time, more voices supported Lauren's actions. The restrictions of the Prime Directive began to be questioned. The idea that younger species should be helped rather than simply observed began to gain support in the Federation Council. Now, on this new world, the Federation made a decision. They invited humanity to join the galactic community. They offered friendship and trade and partnership. They offered knowledge and technology, and the chance to learn from millions of years of accumulated wisdom across the stars. Humanity accepted. For the first time in 10,000 years, Earth was no longer alone. Marcus stood in the presence of the new Valorian ambassador and spoke a single sentence. He said that his ancestor David had told his people that one day the sky people would return. He said that David had always believed that humans would one day be ready to take their place among the stars as equals. And he said that David's belief had come true. The legacy of that first contact, the knowledge that had been preserved and passed down through thousands of years of human history, had made this moment possible. In exile on a remote world, an ancient Valorian named Lauren Hayes received a message. She read about humanity's advancement. She read about the first contact having been successful. She read about a young diplomat named Marcus who traced his ancestry back to a tribal leader named David. Tears formed in her eyes as she read the words. She had spent thousands of years wondering if her decision had been right. Now she knew. She had changed history. She had given humanity a chance, and humanity had proven itself worthy of that chance. Her exile, her punishment, her sacrifice had all been worth it. Marcus stood in the grand hall of the United Earth government, looking at the images projected on the massive screens before him. The new Valorian ambassador had just made the formal offer to humanity. Earth would be welcomed into the Galactic Federation as a full member with all the rights and responsibilities that came with such membership. Humanity would have a seat on the Council of Worlds. Humanity would have access to technology and knowledge accumulated across thousands of worlds and millions of years of civilization. Humanity would no longer be alone in the universe. But before Marcus could accept this offer, he had to do something important. He had to travel to the exile world where Lauren Hayes had been sent so many thousands of years ago. He had to thank her. He had to tell her what her sacrifice had accomplished. He had to make sure that she understood that her name would not be forgotten in human history. She would be remembered not as a criminal or a rule breaker, but as the person who had believed in humanity's potential, when humanity did not yet believe in itself. The journey to the exile world took weeks in the fast Valorian ships. Marcus had never traveled in space before. Looking out at the stars, he felt a connection to David, his ancestor. David must have felt the same wonder looking at these stars 10,000 years ago. David must have understood in that moment when he first saw the universe as it truly was, that everything would change. Everything had changed. The exile world was small and cold and relatively empty. Lauren had spent 10,000 years here, watching from a distance as the civilization she had helped create grew stronger. The Valorian government had maintained her exile as punishment for her crimes against the Prime Directive. But they had also maintained her communications access and her ability to monitor Earth. They had let her watch as humanity developed. It had been a strange punishment, one that gave Lauren both suffering and satisfaction in equal measure. Lauren was waiting when Marcus arrived. She was ancient by human standards, though Valorians lived for thousands of years. Her blue skin had faded slightly with age. Her large eyes still held that brightness that had captivated David so many centuries ago. When she saw Marcus, she immediately recognized him. She could see David in his face, in his bearing, in the way he carried himself with dignity and purpose. Marcus explained to Lauren who he was. He told her about David and how David had become the foundation of human civilization. He told her about the farming techniques and the metallurgy and the writing that David had preserved and passed down. He told her about the thousands of years of human history that had followed. He told her about wars and peace, about art and science, about the rise and fall of empires, about human triumphs and human failures. He told her that through it all, the knowledge she had given to David had guided humanity forward. Lauren listened to everything Marcus said. As he spoke, memories came flooding back. She remembered David's face when he first saw the stars. She remembered the fear and wonder mixed together in his eyes. She remembered the moment when she had decided to break the rules and give humanity a chance. She remembered standing on the Valorian ship for the last time, watching David disappear into the distance. And now, 10,000 years later, that young tribal leader's descendant was standing before her, telling her that she had changed everything. Marcus gave Lauren a gift. It was a recording of David's story as it had been told and retold through human history. It contained the legends and the myths and the fragments of truth that had survived thousands of years of retelling. It contained the history of how humans had developed from primitive hunters into a civilization capable of reaching the stars. It was a record of everything that her sacrifice had made possible. Lauren asked Marcus about humanity. She wanted to know what humans were like after 10,000 years of development. Marcus told her about human creativity and human passion. He told her about human art and music and literature. He told her about human philosophy and science and exploration. He told her that humans were capable of both great cruelty and great kindness. He told her that humans were complicated and sometimes contradictory, but also beautiful in their complexity. Then Marcus told Lauren something that made her pause. He told her that many humans were opposed to joining the Galactic Federation. Many humans feared the unknown. Many humans believed that humanity should develop alone, without outside interference. Marcus explained that this was a debate that had raged in the human government for weeks. Some leaders wanted to accept the Valorian offer immediately and join the Federation. Others wanted to take more time. Others wanted to reject the offer entirely. Lauren understood this conflict. She understood the fear that came with contact with the unknown. She understood the desire to remain independent and self-sufficient. She had felt these same fears when she had made the decision to contact David all those thousands of years ago. She had understood the weight of the choice she was making. But she had made the choice anyway because she believed it was right. Marcus asked Lauren for advice. He asked if she thought humanity should join the Galactic Federation. He asked if she thought humanity was ready for this step. Lauren considered the question carefully. She thought about what she had learned in her 10,000 years of exile, watching humanity develop and grow. She thought about the potential that she had seen in David all those years ago. She thought about what humanity had accomplished since then. Lauren told Marcus that humanity was ready. She said that humans had proven themselves to be capable of great things. She said that humans had taken the knowledge they had been given and had done extraordinary things with it. She said that humans had earned the right to take their place among the stars as equals. She said that the only thing that had held humanity back for so long was the belief that they were alone. Now that they knew they were not alone, now that they understood their true potential, there was no limit to what they could accomplish. But Lauren also warned Marcus. She told him that the galaxy was not always a friendly place. She told him that not all species were kind or honorable. She told him that humanity would face challenges and conflicts in the wider galaxy. She told him that it was important for humans to remain strong and united and true to their values. She told him that the knowledge they had been given should be used wisely and carefully. Marcus listened to everything Lauren said. He recorded her words and her advice. He made sure that her voice would be heard by the human government and by all of humanity. He made sure that Lauren's perspective would inform the decision about joining the Galactic Federation. Before Marcus left the exile world, he made Lauren an offer. The Valorian Federation was reconsidering Lauren's punishment. Many in the Federation Council now believed that what Lauren had done was right. Many believed that she should be pardoned and allowed to return to active service. Many believed that Lauren's crime had been transformed by time into an act of great courage and wisdom. The Federation was offering Lauren the choice to return to civilization. She could leave the exile world. She could reclaim her position and her purpose. Or, if she preferred, she could remain on the exile world in peace, knowing that her actions had been vindicated. Lauren did not answer immediately. She asked for time to think. She asked for time to consider what she wanted for the remainder of her long life. As Marcus prepared to leave, he stood with Lauren one last time on the highest point of the exile world. Together they looked up at the stars. Marcus told her that somewhere among those stars, on a planet called Earth, humans were looking up at the same sky and wondering about the possibilities that awaited them. He told her that all of those humans, billions of them, owed their existence and their future to her decision to believe in them. He told her that she would never be forgotten. He told her that her name would be written into human history forever.